He will tend his flock like a shepherd. He will gather the lambs in his arms and gently lead those that are with young. Isaiah 40:11. You've been holding it together all day. The quiet ache in your chest, the long pauses between thoughts. It's all a bit too much sometimes, isn't it? And now, night has come. The world is hushed. And you, dear child of God, are not forgotten. Come here. Come closer. Let this be a quiet place for your soul. No expectations. No need to explain. Just you and the gentle hands of your shepherd. Let the old stories of faith wrap around you like a woolen shawl. Let the scriptures settle your heart like a lullaby from heaven. You don't need to be strong now, not anymore. He is near, and he will carry you. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. You don't have to hold everything. The hands of Jesus are already holding you. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Psalm 27:1. It was a house with chipped paint and a front porch that leaned a little to the left. The kind of place you wouldn't look at twice. Except there was always a lamp in the window. Every night, without fail. Soft amber light spilling through the glass as if someone inside was keeping watch. Mrs. Elsie Martin lived there, 83 years old, widowed for 29 of them. Her children had long moved away, different states, different lives. But she stayed, in the house where they all once belonged, in the quiet neighborhood where the mailboxes rusted in place. Each evening, as the shadows grew long across her linoleum kitchen floor, she would walk slowly to the window, reach up with steady fingers, and turn the lamp on. It wasn't much, but to her it was a promise. A promise that someone might still come, that someone still needed to see that light. Even if no one knocked, even if no one came. Still, the light remained. She would sit by it, knitting soft baby blankets for the church, or reading her worn Bible where the pages curled at the corners. Sometimes she fell asleep in that chair, her breath rising and falling like waves on a still shore. And in those moments in the hush of the night, when the world was tucked in behind dark curtains, she would whisper to God, not with big words, not even with many, just, I'm here, Lord, and sometimes, I know you are too. Take a deep breath. Let that light in the window warm your own heart. Rest here for a moment. Elsie had known the sound of silence too well, the kind that echoes, the kind that presses against the chest like a weighted blanket. After her husband Harold passed, the silence wasn't just in the walls, it was in the spoon stirring her tea, in the empty bed beside her, in the church pew where his voice no longer harmonized beside hers. But over time, she began to hear other things. The ticking of the old mantel clock, the creak of the floorboards when the cat padded through, the faint hum of the wind weaving through pine branches outside. And she realized she wasn't truly alone. The world was still breathing, and so was she. One evening, after washing her cup and drying it slowly, Elsie went to the window and paused longer than usual. The sky was a deep violet, and stars were beginning to bloom across the night like shy little flowers. She remembered Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? And she whispered it aloud, not because she was afraid, but because saying it made the truth feel nearer. Elsie had lived a long life. She'd seen war and weddings, cradle songs and funerals, births and goodbyes. But that scripture, it had never aged. It was as true now as when she first heard it in Sunday school at 8 years old. God was her light and her salvation. Even now, even still, one night, as she sat beside the window, a quiet knock echoed at her front door. She startled. No one ever came this late. Hardly anyone came at all. She shuffled to the door and opened it slowly. There on the porch stood a boy, 17 maybe. Eyes tired, shoulders slumped, a duffel bag at his feet. I saw your lamp," he said, voice cracking. "I didn't know where else to go." Elsie didn't ask questions, didn't demand answers. She only opened the door wider. "Come in, child," she whispered, "as you found the right place." That night, the light in the window didn't just shine outward. It shone inward too, into the heart of a tired boy and the soul of a faithful old woman who had been waiting not just for someone, but for God to remind her again that no act of faith is ever forgotten. Even the turning on of a little lamp. Take a deep breath. Let the hush of that porch wrap around your heart. The door is open. The light is on. You are seen. You are welcome. You are home. Child, bedtime spiritual takeaway. No light you offer in love is ever wasted. God sees every small kindness, and He comes gently to those who wait in the quiet. You will be safe in His care. His faithfulness will protect and defend you. Psalm 91:4. It had started to rain, not the kind of rain that rushes in angry and fast, but the soft kind, like fingers gently tapping on an old rooftop. Elsie sat by the window again, the same chair, the same blanket draped across her knees. The boy, his name was Caleb, was asleep in the guest room, the one that still held the scent of lavender from a sachet long forgotten in the drawer. She didn't ask where he'd come from, didn't press him for details. She only knew this: he was weary, and her house, with its warm lamp and silent prayers, was a shelter tonight. Take a deep breath. Can you hear the rain too? The gentle rhythm of heaven's lullaby. Rest here for a moment. When Elsie was a little girl, she used to fall asleep listening to that very sound. Back then, her mother would hum hymns in the kitchen, a quiet voice against the backdrop of rain, soft songs of refuge, of wings and shelter, of a God who watches through the storm. And now, all these years later, with age in her bones and silver in her hair, the rain still whispered the same truth. You are safe here. Elsie closed her eyes. Behind her lids, she could still see the past muddy boots on the porch after school, the smell of Harold's pipe smoke, the baby crying down the hall. Life had been full, and sometimes hard, but here in the hush of rain, only peace remained. In the morning, Caleb had made tea, clumsily. Yes, a few spilled leaves on the counter and the kettle nearly boiled dry, but Elsie smiled at the effort. He sat across from her, stirring honey into his cup. "I didn't think people like you existed," he said. Elsie raised a brow gently. "Old," she teased. He shook his head, smiling faintly. "No, kind." She let that sit in the air for a while, like the steam rising from their cups. Then she whispered, "Sometimes kindness is the only thing I have left to give." That afternoon, the rain returned. Caleb stayed another night, and another. He never said much, but slowly, he began to help. He swept the porch, fixed the loose latch on the gate, carried her groceries from the little corner store. And in the quiet hours, Elsie read him the Psalms. Sometimes aloud, sometimes just enough for him to hear, even if he didn't respond. One night, as the storm grew louder, Caleb stood in the doorway of the living room and asked, "Do you really think God still sees people like me?" Elsie looked up. Her voice was soft but sure. He never stopped. Later that night, the power went out. Darkness wrapped the house in velvet stillness. But Elsie was already ready. She lit the oil lamp beside her chair, just like her mother used to do. And the light flickered warm and gold. Caleb came and sat beside her. They said nothing for a long while. The only sound the rain on the roof, and somewhere in that silence, Caleb's shoulders dropped, his eyes closed, and he slept. Truly slept, for the first time in months. Take a deep breath. Can you feel that deep hush again? The kind only God can give you are not forgotten. You are deeply known. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. God shelters us in ways we don't always see. Sometimes, His comfort arrives like soft rain and a warm lamp in a stranger's house. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies, and not one of them is forgotten before God? Luke 12:6. Morning came quietly. The rain had passed in the night, and now the sun filtered through clouds like soft milk and tea. A pale light that kissed the front porch and warmed the worn wood beneath Elsie's slippers. She stood by the screen door, mug in hand, watching 2 sparrows flit and flutter in the hedges. Chirping, calling, alive. Take a deep breath. Let your soul rest in this slow morning. God is already awake. Caleb sat at the edge of the porch steps. He didn't say much, he rarely did. But this morning, his hands were open in his lap, and his face tilted toward the sun. It was the most at peace she'd seen him. You know what I've always loved about sparrows? Elsie's voice was almost a whisper. Caleb looked up, eyes still sleepy. They don't matter much to anyone. Not really, people hardly notice them. No feathers like peacocks, no songs like nightingales. But God notices. He never misses even one. She sipped her tea. Reminds me of me some days. Caleb gave the faintest of smiles. I think I get that, he said. That afternoon they worked in the garden. Elsie pulled weeds with slow, steady hands. Caleb turned over the soil with an old spade that had belonged to Harold. There was comfort in the ordinary. The sun on their backs, the smell of earth and roots and sky. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. The silence was not empty now. It was full of presence, full of something holy. When they came back inside, Elsie took out a small notebook from her shelf. The cover was frayed, the corners bent from years of use. She placed it in Caleb's hands. These are all the verses that saved me, she said. Sometimes I forget them, but when I open these pages, they remember me. Caleb turned the pages slowly. Psalm 34, Isaiah 43, John 14, Romans 8. Each verse handwritten, some smudged with old tears. He paused at Luke 12:6. Not one of them is forgotten before God. He read it aloud, his voice thick. Not even one, Elsie said. Not even you. That night, as the sun melted behind the trees, they lit the lamp again. Elsie sat in her chair, knitting soft yarn into the shape of hope. Caleb sat across from her, holding the old Bible in his lap. There was no storm tonight, no lightning, no drama. Just the quiet miracle of 2 people finding shelter in one another. A boy without a place, a woman with an empty house, and a God who sees the sparrows. Take a deep breath. Let yourself feel small, but never forgotten. The same God who watches the birds is watching you. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. You may feel unseen by the world, but you are never forgotten by God. Not one breath of yours has gone unnoticed. You matter deeply. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. Psalm 91:4. In the back of Elsie's hallway closet, beneath a box of Christmas lights and a pile of Harold's old flannel shirts, there was a blanket she had never given away. It was pale blue, crocheted by hand, each loop and line a small prayer stitched during her husband's last winter. She had made it for him, to keep him warm when the chemo made his skin cold, to cover his thin shoulders when his body ached and trembled. But he had passed before she could lay it over him. And so, she kept it folded. Not because she couldn't give it away, but because she didn't yet know where it belonged. Take a deep breath. Do you have something tucked away too? A memory wrapped in fabric, or silence. You can rest with it now. That evening, as the wind whispered through the pines outside, Caleb sat quietly on the floor by the fireplace. He was tracing the edge of her old Bible with his finger, as if memorizing its shape. Elsie stood in the hallway, the closet door opens, the blanket in her arms. She held it close to her chest for a long while. It still smelled faintly of cedar and peppermint. Still held the weight of tears she had cried into its threads when no one else was around to listen. Then slowly, she walked to the living room. Here, she said gently, placing the folded blanket in Caleb's lap. He looked up at her, his eyes wide, uncertain. I made it a long time ago, she whispered. I never gave it to anyone, but I think it's meant for you now. He didn't speak, only held it, ran his fingers over the softness, and laid it across his legs like something sacred. And maybe thus it was, because sometimes the holiest things aren't found in cathedrals or sermons, but in old blankets, shared tears, and the quiet bravery of letting go. That night, Caleb fell asleep on the sofa, wrapped in that blue blanket. It covered his shoulders the way Elsie had once hoped it would cover Harold's. She watched him for a long time, a peace on his face that hadn't been there before. And something inside her shifted, not in pain, not in grief, but in surrender. A quiet letting go, a quiet making room. Take a deep breath. There are some things we hold for years without knowing why. And then, one day, God shows us where they belong. You are safe. Even your pain has a place in his story. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Nothing given in love is ever wasted. Even the things you've hidden away, God sees them. And in time, he redeems them. Before they call, I will answer. While they are still speaking, I will hear. Isaiah 65:24. There was a small two-line notebook on the windowsill in the kitchen. Faded pink cover, corners curled, tea stains across the bottom half. Elsie hadn't opened it in years. It was a prayer journal started sometime in her 50s, during the days when Harold's health began to fade and her children began to drift into adulthood and distance. She'd written in it faithfully then, poured her heart out onto every page. But life had a way of softening even the deepest habits. And one day, she simply stopped writing. Still, the book remained undisturbed until now. Take a deep breath. Some prayers take years to blossom, but none are forgotten. Not by him. It was Caleb who found it. He had been looking for a teaspoon when he saw the worn journal by the window, half buried beneath a stack of recipe cards and a cracked salt shaker. He picked it up gently, fingertips brushing over the cover as if it might crumble. Can I read it? He asked, unsure. Elsie paused, then nodded slowly. If you like. I haven't opened it in a long while. That night, by the lamp's soft glow. He read aloud one of the entries. Lord, I feel invisible in my own house sometimes. I make dinners, fold socks, smile for the children, but no one sees me. Not really? If you see me, please remind me I still matter. He stopped reading. The air between them felt still, tender. I know that feeling, Caleb whispered. His voice cracked like dry earth in summer. Elsie looked at him, her hands resting on her lap. I think we all do. In our own way, she said, and but God, He sees. Even when we forget to look back. The next evening, Elsie sat at the same kitchen table and opened the notebook again. This time, she read the entries quietly to herself. Page after page of longing, of hope, of loneliness poured out like water on dry ground. And near the middle, a line written in shaky cursive. Lord, if there is still something left for me to do, please send someone to my door. Tears welled in her eyes. She had forgotten she wrote it, forgotten that old ache, and that prayer. And yet, He answered. Not with fanfare, not with grand gestures. Just a tired boy on a quiet night with a duffel bag and nowhere else to go. Take a deep breath. God remembers even what we forget, even the prayers we whisper and bury. The next morning, Elsie left the prayer journal out not as a relic, but as a welcome. Caleb began adding his own pages, and his handwriting was rough, uneven, but every line was honest. Together, they were learning to pray again, not with perfect word, but with presence and with hope. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Even your forgotten prayers are still alive in the heart of God. He answers in His time, and sometimes the answer is already at your door. Two are better than one. If either of them falls, the one will lift up his companion. Ecclesiastes 4:9-10. For a long time after Harold passed, there had only been one chair on the porch, just Elsie's, weather-worn, cushioned with an old floral pillow. The other had been taken inside, stored in the garage, as if keeping it out there would have been too painful, too expectant. But now, there were two again. Take a deep breath. Imagine that porch. Two chairs, not much said to come, but nothing missing. Rest here for a moment. It was Caleb who found the second chair, buried behind old paint cans and a cracked bird bath. He dusted it off, tugged it free, and dragged it out to the porch beside hers. Thought this spot looked too lonely, he said. Elsie looked at him with a slow, gentle smile. She didn't answer with words. Just sat down in her chair, sipped her tea, and looked out toward the trees where birds were flitting back and forth. He sat too, and there they stayed, two quiet souls, watching the evening fold itself gently into night. The thing about a second chair is that it's not just furniture, it's invitation. It says, I expect someone. It says, there's room here for you. Elsie hadn't realized how much she missed that feeling of sitting beside someone, not needing to speak, not needing to perform, just being. That night, they watched fireflies blink like living stars across the yard. Caleb leaned back, arms crossed behind his head. I don't know what comes next, he said. After this, after here. Elsie nodded slowly. Neither do I, she whispered, but maybe. That's not ours to figure out just yet. He turned to her, searching her expression. You're not scared. She shook her head gently. I've been through enough nights to know that the morning always comes. Even if I don't know how it will look, there was peace in that answer. A kind of peace that comes only from time and trust. And that porch, with its 2 chairs, became more than just a place to sit. It became a place of healing, a space where silence was not empty but sacred. Take a deep breath. You don't have to figure everything out tonight. Just sit and know the second chair is waiting. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. You weren't made to go through life alone. God brings people beside you, sometimes for a season, sometimes for life, but always for love. Give us this day our daily bread. Matthew 6:11. The scent filled the whole house, warm, yeasty, a little sweet at the edges. Elsie hadn't baked bread in a while, not since Christmas, maybe. But this morning she had woken early, her hands aching for something simple and sacred. So she'd pulled out the old mixing bowl, the one with the faded blue rim, and began again. Flour, salt, yeast, water, kneading with slow hands, letting it rise beside the window where sunlight filtered in like a quiet blessing. Take a deep breath. Can you smell it too? The comfort of something made with love. Rest here for a moment. When Caleb walked into the kitchen, his eyes lit up. "Are you baking?" Elsie smiled softly. It seemed like a bread kind of morning. He pulled out a chair and watched. For a while, neither of them spoke. The only sound, the soft thump of dough meeting wood, and the low ticking of the clock above the sink. She remembered, as she kneaded, how Harold used to love the crusty end of the loaf. How the children would fight for the first warm slice. How laughter used to echo down this hallway like music played just for them. Those days were long gone, but not forgotten. Memories don't spoil like milk. They rise again, in flour-covered hands and buttered crumbs. Later that morning, she pulled the loaf from the oven, golden, cracking just slightly at the top. Steam escaping like breath from a sleeping child. She sliced it, spread a little honey on 2 pieces, and handed one to Caleb. They ate in silence. Tears pricked the corner of her eyes, but she didn't blink them away. "Thank you," Caleb said quietly, "for this, for all of this." Elsie looked at him, her voice like a hush. "I used to bake to feed a house full of mouths. Now I bake just to remember that love still lives here." He finished the last bite. "Do you think love ever runs out?" She shook her head slowly. "No, not when God is the one who gives it. It just changes form. Sometimes it looks like marriage, sometimes like family, sometimes like bread in a quiet kitchen shared with someone who needs it. Take a deep breath. What if today's bread is enough? You don't need to carry tomorrow yet. Let this moment be your nourishment." Bedtime spiritual takeaway. God gives us what we need for today, not always more, not always less, just enough. And sometimes it comes in the form of warm bread and a companion at the table. "Be still and know that I am God." Psalm 46:10. It had been a slow day. One of those days where the hours drift like leaves on a lazy river, soft, unhurried, without demand. Elsie had dusted the shelves, straightened the hymnals on her bookshelf, fed the cat, and watched the afternoon sun make soft gold shapes across the floorboards. Caleb had gone for a walk, said he needed to clear the corners of his mind. He said it like a joke, but Elsie knew it wasn't. Some thoughts don't leave unless you walk them out beneath trees. Take a deep breath. Let today be slow. You don't have to rush to be seen. You are already seen. She sat by the window with a mug of mint tea in hand, watched a squirrel skitter across the fence, listened to the soft buzz of a bee hovering near the violets by the porch. So many small things, but sacred, so very sacred. A butterfly landed on the windowsill, white wings like fragile prayers. She smiled. "Hello, little one," she whispered. Then chuckled softly at herself, talking to insects. But why not God made them too? When Caleb returned, he looked different somehow. Less heavy, as if a layer of dust had been lifted from his heart. He carried a small stone in his palm. Smooth, round, ordinary. "I found this down by the stream," he said, as if it explained everything. Elsie took it from him gently, turned it over in her fingers. "Looks like it's been held for a long time," she murmured. He nodded. "I liked that it was small and simple and enough." She smiled. "Sometimes I think God lives best in the small things, the simple things, the moments we almost overlook." That evening they read together, not out loud. Just in the same room, Caleb with a book of poetry, Elsie with the Psalms. Soft lamplight, the sound of pages turning, two hearts breathing in sync. There was no great event, no breakthrough, just a peace that filled the house like a gentle breeze through an open window. Later, as Elsie lay in bed, her prayer was short. "Thank you, Lord, for the quiet." And perhaps, on some distant holy wind, a quiet voice replied, "I'm in the quiet too, child. Take a deep breath. The small things are not so small. They are full of the presence of God." Bedtime spiritual takeaway. You don't need a mountain to feel God. Sometimes he comes in a butterfly, a stone, a gentle silence. He is the quiet in your room tonight. You are not alone. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Psalm 34:18. There was a shoebox under Elsie's bed, wrapped in twine, covered in dust. And inside it letters. Letters she had written but never mailed, some to her children, some to Harold, long after he was gone, and one, just one, to God. It had no stamp, no return address, only her handwriting on old stationery. "To the one who knows me, take a deep breath. We all have words we couldn't say out loud. Let them rest here a while. You are safe." She hadn't looked inside that box in over a decade. It felt too tender, too fragile. Like opening it would let the ache back in. But something about Caleb's presence, his quiet, his wounded but seeking heart, made her want to remember the pieces she had tucked away. That evening, while he sat reading near the fire, Elsie pulled the box from beneath the bed. She untied the twine slowly, as if her fingers already knew the weight of what they were about to hold. The first letter was to her daughter, never sent. Words about how much she missed her voice, how birthdays felt hollow without her. Another was to Harold, written 3 years after he passed. She had signed it, "Your Elsie, still waiting." And then the one to God. She opened it last, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was a single page, creased from time, but still clearly legible. "Lord, I don't know how to pray anymore. Sometimes I just sit in this room and hope you're near. I keep waiting for the ache to end, but it doesn't. Still, I believe you see me. Even if I can't see you, if I never feel joy again in this life, will you still stay with me?" Elsie read it aloud slowly, her voice barely more than a breath. When she looked up, she found Caleb sitting still, eyes glassy. "Did he stay with you?" he asked. She nodded. He never left. They sat in silence for a long time. Not awkward silence, but reverent, like church pew silence. Like the kind of stillness that only comes when two people acknowledge something sacred and broken and beautiful. Later that night, Elsie placed the God letter back into the box. But this time she didn't tie the lid closed. Instead, she placed the box on the shelf near the lamp. Visible, honest, as if to say this too is part of my story. Take a deep breath. There is no shame in letters you never sent. No shame in prayers you once whispered and forgot. They are still heard. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. God hears even the prayers you can't finish. He stays through the heartbreak, through the waiting, through the silence. You are never too far for his nearness. After the wind came a gentle whisper. 1 Kings 19:12. The wind had been strong all week, rattling the shutters, sighing through the pine trees, tugging at the edges of the house like it was trying to pull it back in time. Elsie could feel it in her joints, aching more than usual. She sat with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, watching branches bend like prayerful bodies. Caleb kept checking the windows, his restlessness rising with every gust. "I don't like storms," he confessed. "Too loud, too much." Elsie nodded. "I used to think the same," she said softly. "But sometimes the loudness is what finally leads us to quiet. Take a deep breath. Even when the winds howl, there is a whisper waiting. Let yourself settle now." That evening, the sky turned the color of bruised plums. A storm was coming, not a dramatic one, but steady, firm, certain. Elsie lit candles around the room, not out of fear, but as a gesture of peace. Let the house glow. She smiled, no matter what the sky decides to do. Caleb paced the living room for a while, tried to read, tried to be still, but finally he spoke. "Sometimes I feel like my whole life is made of storms. Things breaking, people leaving. Noise in my head I can't quiet down." Elsie listened, her hands wrapped around her tea mug. "And do you ever hear anything gentle?" she asked. He paused, looked at her, and shrugged. "I used to. When I was little, there were days I'd sit under a tree and feel like God was close. But that was a long time ago." Elsie reached for her Bible, turned to the story of Elijah, and read slowly. The Lord was not in the wind, nor the earthquake, nor the fire, but after the fire came a gentle whisper. She closed the book. "Maybe that whisper's been waiting for you to stop running," she said softly. Maybe it never left. That night, after the candles were blown out and the rain began to fall in rhythmic taps against the roof, Caleb stood at the window, and for the first time in years, he closed his eyes and listened. Not to the thunder, not to the wind, but to something beneath it all. A hush, a presence, a whisper not heard with ears, but with the soul. Take a deep breath. Let the storm pass by. Let the whisper come in. You don't need to chase it. It is already near. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. God doesn't always shout. Sometimes. He waits in the stillness after the chaos, after the breaking, and he speaks in a voice softer than breath. A whisper just for you. My heart is steadfast, O God, my heart is steadfast. I will sing and make melody. Psalm 57:7. The drawer stuck a little when she pulled it open. It always had. The old oak sideboard had belonged to her mother, and Elsie had never once thought to replace it. Inside were things most people would call forgettable. A dried lavender sachet, 2 faded bookmarks from church, buttons, a pen that didn't write, and tucked between an envelope and a church bulletin from 1989, a folded piece of sheet music. Elsie paused, then unfolded it slowly. It was an old hymn, one she hadn't sung in decades. Jesus, Savior, pilot me over life's tempestuous sea. Take a deep breath. Can you hear it? A hymn you once knew, returning like a friend. She held it in her lap for a long time. The words blurry now, not from age, but from tears she hadn't expected. It had been her favorite. Harold used to hum it under his breath while shaving. She'd sung it once during a storm in 1963 while their children clung to her knees. It wasn't just a hymn, it was a lifeline, and she had forgotten it. Caleb walked in, a book in hand. He paused when he saw her there, eyes closed, lips silently moving to a melody he couldn't hear. "What's that?" he asked. She opened her eyes, smiled, and handed him the paper. "A song I used to sing, long before the world turned noisy." He read the words quietly. "Would you sing it again?" he asked. Her eyes widened. "I'm not much of a voice anymore," she chuckled. But Caleb shrugged. "I don't need perfect, just real." That night, in the quiet of the living room, Elsie sang. Her voice was thin, weathered, not strong like it once had been, but it was beautiful. Caleb sat on the floor near her chair, eyes closed, letting the song wash over him like evening light. "Jesus, Savior, pilot me." She sang slowly, each word a thread, pulling together the torn places in both their hearts. When she finished, the room felt holier somehow, as if God himself had leaned in close just to listen. Caleb opened his eyes. "Thank you," he said softly. "I didn't know how much I needed that." Elsie smiled. "Neither did I. Take a deep breath. You may not remember every word, but your soul does. Let the hymn rise again inside you. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Some songs never leave us. They return when we need them most, carrying the voice of God, softly reminding us that we are still being guided. In the morning, Lord, you hear my voice. In the morning I lay my requests before you and wait expectantly." Psalm 5:3. The mail usually came by noon, right around the time Elsie poured her second cup of tea, right around the time the cat settled by the heater vent and the shadows began to shift across the porch. But today it was late, almost evening. And for some reason that delay stirred something in her heart, a restlessness, a wondering. She sat in her rocker on the porch, Caleb beside her with a notepad and pencil in hand, sketching the shape of the trees. They watched the sky deepen from pale to gold, and then into that soft twilight blue that always made Elsie's heart ache a little. Like something beautiful had passed through but wouldn't stay. Take a deep breath. Some answers arrive slowly, serenum, but they always come on time. Rest here for a moment. When the mail truck finally rumbled down the road, Elsie stood to greet it, her bones stiff from sitting. The mailbox groaned when she opened it. One catalog, a coupon for carpet cleaning, and a single envelope handwritten, no return address, just her name. Miss Elsie Martin. The handwriting was familiar, faint, a little unsure. She opened it slowly, her fingers trembling. Dear Mrs. Martin, I don't know if you remember me. My name is Abigail. You taught me Sunday school when I was 7. I was the girl with the missing front tooth and the bright red shoes that squeaked when I walked. I'm 28 now, and this morning, I thought about your voice, about the way you used to say God sees you, even when you feel invisible. I felt invisible for a while, but today, I remembered you. So I'm writing to say, thank you. You may not know what you gave me, but I carry it still. With love, Abigail. Elsie held the letter to her chest. Tears traced her cheeks. She hadn't thought of Abigail in years, hadn't expected to be remembered. But there it was, a reminder, wrapped in ink and hope. Nothing given in faith is ever wasted. Even a word spoken decades ago can return, full of life. Caleb looked over at her. Good news, he asked. Elsie nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Sometimes, she said finally, God answers with a letter. That night, she placed Abigail's letter in her Bible between the pages of Psalm 5. I lay my requests before you and wait expectantly. She whispered the verse aloud, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something lift inside her. Something long awaited, something full of light. Take a deep breath, even if it's been years. Even if you've stopped expecting it, God has not forgotten your seeds of love. They will bloom in His time. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. When you love with God's heart, your kindness lives on. Quietly, faithfully, waiting for its time to bloom. And one day, a letter might arrive reminding you that nothing is ever lost in Him. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Psalm 23, 2-3. Elsie woke up, and her knees didn't ache. Her back wasn't stiff. The usual groan that followed rising from bed never came. She sat on the edge of the mattress, blinking, then whispered aloud, "Well now, what's this?" She reached for her slippers, stood up slowly, and still, nothing. No pain, no tightness, just peace. Take a deep breath. Can you feel your body softening too, even if not yet? The promise still holds. Rest in it. Downstairs. The sun was already reaching through the curtains, casting long golden stripes across the floor. The air smelled like cinnamon. Caleb had started breakfast, toast, eggs, and something sweet, judging by the faint scent of sugar warming in the oven. "Morning," he said. "Looks like you slept well." "I did," she replied softly, "and I feel new." They ate in the quiet, not needing words. After breakfast, Elsie took her tea out to the porch, sat with her Bible open on her lap, reading Psalm 23 again, though she could have recited it by heart. "He restores my soul." She closed her eyes. Let the words settle like sunlight on skin. Something was different today. Not just her body, her heart too. It felt light, unburdened. Like she had been carrying something for so long that she forgot it was there until it was finally gone. Caleb joined her, carrying 2 slices of warm apple bread. She looked at him. Really looked. There was something different about him too. His posture, his face, a softening. "Did you sleep?" she asked gently. He nodded for the first time in weeks. Dreamless, but not empty. He paused. I think I felt him last night." Elsie didn't ask who he meant. She just nodded and smiled. "I think I did too." That afternoon, they went for a walk, just a short one down the lane where the trees arched overhead like cathedral ceilings. Elsie pointed out the crocuses blooming near the fence line. "First ones this spring," she said. Caleb crouched beside them, brushed one with his finger. "They look fragile," he murmured. "They are," she said, "but they always come back, no matter how hard the winter. Take a deep breath. This moment may be quiet, but it is not small. God's healing often comes wrapped in stillness. That evening, they sat again in their 2 chairs, the stars above them blinking like blessings. Elsie reached for Caleb's hand. He didn't pull away. "I don't know what happens next," he said quietly. "But this feels like a beginning." She nodded. "It is, even for me." Bedtime spiritual takeaway. God restores in His time. The pain doesn't last forever, and when it lifts even for a day, it is His gentle whisper, saying, "I remember you, and I am making all things new. Those who sow in tears shall reap with shouts of joy." Psalm 126:5. Behind Elsie's house was a garden. Once it had bloomed with roses and marigolds, lilies and daisies dancing in the sunlight. But years had passed, and the garden had grown wild. Weeds tangled where tulips once stood, and the old stone path was cracked and faded. No one had tended it in a long time, not since Harold's passing, not since the children moved away. Take a deep breath. There are places inside us that grow wild when we forget to tend them. Rest here. One afternoon, Caleb brought out a pair of gloves and some pruning shears. "I thought maybe we could start small," he said, his voice hopeful but unsure. Elsie smiled softly, surprised by the offer. Together they worked, cutting back dead branches, pulling weeds with careful hands, clearing space for new life. It wasn't easy. Sometimes the thorns scratched their fingers. Sometimes they grew tired. But slowly, little by little, green shoots began to peek through. At night, Elsie sat by the window overlooking the garden. She thought about the years of silence there, the seasons of neglect, and she whispered a prayer for the soil. "Bring beauty again," she said. "Take a deep breath. Maybe there's a forgotten garden in your heart too. And maybe God is ready to help it bloom again." Days turned into weeks, and the garden began to change. Bright blossoms unfolded like whispered promises, and the air filled with sweet scents once lost. Caleb and Elsie would often sit together on the porch, watching their garden grow, a quiet testament to hope and renewal. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. No place is too forgotten for God's grace. Even the wildest places can be made new. Your heart is a garden, and He is the gardener. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for His compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Lamentations 3:22-23. Morning came slowly that day. The sky was soft gray, clouds drifting like whispered prayers. Elsie opened her eyes to the gentle light, the sound of birds outside the window. She felt the weight of years still resting on her shoulders, but also a quiet hope, a promise she couldn't quite name. Take a deep breath. Each morning is new, full of mercy and grace. Rest here in this truth. Caleb joined her at the kitchen table, pouring 2 cups of tea. "We made it through another night," he said softly. Elsie smiled. "Yes, we did." There was no grand celebration, no sudden revelations, just the steady pulse of life continuing, the quiet faithfulness of God's presence. They sat together in silence, listening to the rhythm of the day beginning, the slow stirring of hope in the soft, unassuming light. Take a deep breath on whatever comes today. God's mercies are fresh and new. You are held in His faithful hands. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. No matter the darkness of yesterday, each morning brings new mercy. God's love never fails. You are wrapped in His faithfulness, and you are never alone. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Psalm 19:1. Late into the night, when the world had quieted and shadows stretched long, Elsie would sometimes hear a song, a clear, sweet melody carried on the breeze, the song of a nightingale hidden somewhere in the trees. It was not loud or commanding, but gentle and persistent, like a whisper of hope in the darkness. Take a deep breath, listen closely. God's glory sings even in the stillness. Rest here a while. One evening, Caleb joined Elsie on the porch as the stars began to blink awake. "Do you hear that?" she asked softly. He nodded. "It's beautiful." She smiled, eyes shining. "It reminds me that even in the darkest times there is light, there is song, there is God." They sat together in silence, letting the nightingale's music fill the spaces between their hearts. In that moment, the past and future faded away. All that remained was the present wrapped in melody and grace. Take a deep breath. God's beauty is all around you in the songs you can hear, and in the silence you cannot. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Even when the night feels long, God's song never stops. His presence is constant, and His love surrounds you like a melody. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Lamentations 3:22-23. As the day folded gently into evening, Elsie stepped onto the porch once more. The sky was painted in soft shades of lavender and rose. The clouds stretched thin like whispered promises. She breathed in the cool air, feeling the day's weight begin to lift. The horizon held a quiet embrace, a tender reminder of God's unending love. Take a deep breath. Let the colors of the evening sky soothe your soul. Rest in His faithful embrace. Caleb stood beside her, silent. They watched the sun's last light fade slowly beyond the trees, painting their hearts with peace. "It feels like a hug from God," Caleb said softly. Elsie nodded. "Yes, and every evening it promises a new beginning." There was no rush to leave the porch, no hurry to move on. Just two souls wrapped in quiet gratitude, held by the gentle arms of evening light. Take a deep breath. You are wrapped in God's love, steady, unfailing, like the endless sky above. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. God's love surrounds you always in every ending and every beginning. You are safe. You are held. You are deeply cherished. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. Sometimes the greatest gift is simply to be present, to sit quietly with another soul, without words, without expectations, just sharing the sacred space between heartbeats. Elsie and Caleb had learned this well. In the stillness of the late afternoon, they would sit together on the porch, letting the silence speak louder than any conversation. Take a deep breath. Let the silence wrap around you like a warm shawl. Rest here in this holy stillness. One afternoon, Caleb looked at Elsie and said, "You don't have to fix anything for me." She smiled softly. "I'm not trying to I'm just here." Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes presence itself was the healing balm. As the sun dipped low, they sat side by side, watching shadows grow long and soft. No need for grand gestures or loud words, just two hearts resting in the quiet grace of God's presence. Take a deep breath. You are not alone in your silence. God is with you, and so am I. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. You don't have to carry your burdens alone. God's presence is the quiet strength that holds you steady. Rest in Him tonight. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him, and he with me. Revelation 3:20. The door to Elsie's home was old wood, paint peeling softly at the edges. It creaked when opened, and sometimes when closed, but it was always open to those who needed shelter. Caleb had found safety here, but Elsie's home had welcomed many before him. Neighbors, children, a stray cat once. Each visitor left a mark, and each left with a blessing. Take a deep breath. Imagine an open door waiting for you. Step inside. You are welcome here. One evening, as the sun dipped low, a knock came at the door. Elsie opened it slowly. A stranger stood there, eyes tired, shoulders bowed. Without hesitation, Elsie stepped aside. "Come in," she said simply. The stranger entered, and the door closed gently behind them. In that moment, the open door was more than just wood and paint. It was grace made visible. An invitation to rest, to be known, to be loved. Take a deep breath. God stands at your door, knocking softly. Will you open it? Bedtime spiritual takeaway. No matter where you are, God's invitation stands open. He waits patiently, ready to come in and fill your heart with peace. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. The night was still. The world hushed to a whisper. Elsie sat in her chair by the lamp, wrapped in the soft blue blanket she had given Caleb. The days had been long, and the nights sometimes longer still, but now, finally, there was rest. A deep, soul-soothing rest, the kind that comes not from absence of trouble, but from the presence of God. Take a deep breath. Let your heart settle. This rest is yours, waiting quietly, ready to enfold you. Caleb sat nearby, eyes heavy with sleep. He reached for Elsie's hand, and she squeezed it gently. "No more running," he whispered. "No more hiding," she replied. They sat together in silence, the weight of the world lifting, replaced by a quiet peace. God's promise was true. Rest was not a far-off dream. It was here, in this moment, in his gentle arms. Take a deep breath. You have carried enough today. Lay down your burdens. Come home to rest in him. Bedtime spiritual takeaway. Jesus invites you, no matter your weariness, no matter your pain, to come and find rest. You are safe. You are loved. You are finally home. Sleep now, wrapped in his peace. Good night, child of God.